National communism in Romania was the state ideology of Communist Romania between the early 1960s and 1989. Having its origins in Gheorghe Gheorghiu-Dej's political emancipation from the Soviet Union, it was greatly developed by Nicolae Ceaușescu, who began in 1971, through his July thesis manifesto, a national cultural revolution. Part of the national mythology was the Nicolae Ceaușescu's cult of personality and the idealization of Romania's history, known in Romanian historiography as Protochronism. This nationalistic ideology was based on a mixture of Marxist Leninist dogmas and doctrines of interwar far-right nationalism. The main argument of the tenet was the endless and unanimous fighting throughout 2,000 years to achieve unity and independence. Internationalist era. Before World War II, the historical ideology was based on Romanian nationalism, and the main dispute in Romanian society was between the people who promoted indigenous traditions and those who wanted a Western values-based society. Marxists played only a minor role in Romanian culture, and the Romanian left was typically of rural, traditional, pre-capitalist persuasion, rather than to support a post-capitalist workers' state as elsewhere in Europe. In this context, the ideological change in the Romanian society after the communists got the power in Romania appeared more radical. In the space of a few years, the history of Romania had been rewritten, while the pre-war history had been written from a nationalist point of view. The new history was written from an internationalist spirit. For instance, in Mihail Rolla's History of Romania, the 1859 union between Wallachia and Moldavia was seen as the will of the bourgeois and boyars who benefited from it, the decision being taken without their consideration of the will of the people. The union of Bessarabia with Romania was seen as being an imperialist intervention against the socialist revolution in Russia, and the union of Transylvania with Romania was considered an occupation. A major change occurred about the relationship of the Romanians with the West. Before the war, the national mythology considered Romanians an island of latinity in a Slavic sea. Rolla's history emphasized the cohabitation of Romanians and Slavs in the Middle Ages and discussed the connections between the Slavs and Romanians, ending with the liberation of Romania by the glorious Soviet army. Independence from Soviet Union. Starting with late 1950s, Romanian nationalism gradually became part of the official ideology, in parallel with a diminution of Slavic, Russian and Soviet importance within Romanian history. This process culminated with the Declaration of Independence of April 1964, when it abandoned internationalism. Rehabilitation of cultural figures. The communist regime integrated the whole Romanian heritage into the national ideology. For instance, right-wing historian Nicolae Ceaușescu was rehabilitated for being anti-fascist, his works being republished with the exception of those that directly argued against communism. Eugen Lavrescu's History Modern Romanian Civilization was republished in an abridged version, and the introduction said Lavrescu's work was not anti-Marxist polemic and that it had common points with historical materialism. Even fascist conducator Ion Antonescu was semi-rehabilitated, getting a much gentler treatment than previously, in line with the nationalism and the facade of anti-Sovietism. This was part of a strategy of inserting great leaders throughout the Romanian history narrative to serve Ceaușescu's cult of personality, Antonescu being seen as a misunderstood patriot rather than a traitor. This process began with Marin Preda's novel De Literal, continuing with Aurica Simeon's preliminary I Politico Diplomatis Insurrectiae Romandi in August 1944, before becoming part of the official ideology in Nicolae Ceaușescu's Istoria Militară a Poporului Roman, Volume 6. Ceaușescu's cultural revolution. While beginning with the 1960s, the Romanian government began to relax the rules and treat its citizens better, including an amnesty of political prisoners and allowing more freedom of expression, such in the nuances that were appropriate in literature. This all ended with the July Theses of 1971, which ended the liberalization and openness, beginning a trend that accentuated the totalitarianism and isolated Romania from the rest of the world. Nationalism became ubiquitous and the most important political argument. Romanians were depicted as being united throughout the history around the leader. Historical research began focusing on the ancient era, especially the Dacian era. The Institute of History of the party, specialized in writing monographs on trade unionists, labor struggle and working-class heroes, began studying the Dacians, politicizing ancient history. In 1980, the Romanian government celebrated the 2050th anniversary of the founding of the unitary and centralized state under Burbista, most notably in the epic film Burbista.